Thank you. Paul Carroll with the Plowshares Fund. I'm curious to bring it up maybe a level from the internal domestic politics to more nation to nation. And we have a very similar analog to North Korea. A lot of differences, but some similarities. And I'm curious about whether the North Korea six-party agreement, which so far is so good, it's holding together with a lot of hard work and a lot of diplomatic nuances. There have been talks about having a grand bargain with Iran. It's not just the nuclear issue, it's about a strategic relationship, and I guess bosom enemies, connotes that. So aside from the discussion, and maybe this is also a question to spill into the next panel, about the parliament and the hardliners internally, we read and we hear often how the Iranian people on the street are very Western, very informed, very modern, very educated. And I'm curious if we're maybe missing something in the conversation here, on whether there is still an interest on the leadership in Iran of a long-term strategic relationship with the U.S., and whether we might hope for that in our next administration. And that is not just the nuclear issue, but there may be something broader to engage on.
Yeah, I think there still is an interest in a strategic dialogue with the United States. Unfortunately, it's coming late in the game, and the United States has missed multiple opportunities to have that discussion when Iran was not in such a powerful position in the region. There were certainly attempts that were made in 2001, 2003, even 2005 and 2006 to get something going with the United States, and the Bush administration did not see fit to engage in that kind of dialogue. Now, of course, Iran has 3,000, 6,000, who knows how many centrifuges spinning away in Natanz. We just had a demonstration of Iranian influence in Iraq when they brokered a ceasefire between the Shiite factions in Qum. It was the head of the Quds Force, General Soleimani, who apparently brokered this deal. This is somebody who we've got on a blacklist, who we won't talk to. We've decided he's a terrorist and his organization is terrorist, so that makes it a little difficult for dialogue. And of course, in Lebanon and in Palestine, Iranian back groups are doing extremely well. So it's going to be a different kind of dialogue maybe than it would have been 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. But I think it's more urgent than it was before. So I would assume that whoever the next president of the United States is would want to try to begin some sort of conversation with the Iranians. It's just a pity it's so late in the game.
I think one of the reasons that Barbara touched on about the fact that it has become so late in the game means that the fundamental balance is very different now from where Iran is and where it was several years ago. I mean, at the time in 2001, when Iran was being so helpful to the United States in Afghanistan, and that's not just during the Bonn conference, but actually in the run-up to that, giving a lot of very detailed information about Taliban targets and other things that, I mean, you never hear about, but that actually helped to transform and make that a much more efficient war against the Taliban. Because of course you remember in 1998, when there were 9 Iranian diplomats who were killed in Mazar-e-Sharif. I remember being in Mashhad at that time. There was a huge military demonstration. There was also to talk about the Iranians themselves going in and actually toppling the Taliban and getting their revenge, if you will, for those diplomats. So of course, Iran had extraordinary information, had extraordinary intelligence and detail about the Taliban because it was their own enemy, and they had themselves nearly gone in. So there was that help in 2001. Iran very much was anticipating that they would get something, that there would be the beginning of some kind of a dialogue coming through their cooperation. Of course, that, as everybody knows, ended with the inclusion of Iran as part of the axis of evil. But the next step, when Iran actually sent across, and of course Trita knows this better than anybody, having written about it, and Barbara as well, extensively in their books, that was sent from Tehran secretly at a time when Iran was in a very weak position, when it knew it was next on the list for regime change. When basically, if this thing in Baghdad and Iraq had not gone so wrong, I mean, there could have been, the next step would have been taken, basically. And so, and in one quotation from someone who was apparently there and heard Dick Cheney say this, when this was presented to him, he said he refused and said, "We don't speak to evil." And that position has persisted, and it's one of the reasons when the Supreme Leader was speaking in Yazd just on January 3rd, in which he made this quite remarkable statement saying that if there will be relations with the United States, and it's in Iran's interest, I would be the first to back them. He said that this was an extraordinary thing. This is basically taking the possibility of relations with the United States away from the ideological sphere and putting it into a pragmatic, these are the reasons why this works for Iran sphere. But that comment was couched in a much broader diatribe against the United States and specifically against this administration. And he felt that it was not going to be possible under this administration. But in any event, the dynamic has changed. Iran is in a much stronger position now, and so has all the more reason to begin this kind of dialogue.
Just to add one other thing, John Bolton said when Iran apparently presented this offer in 2003 to negotiate, Bolton said that Iran should take a number, implying that they indeed would be next on the regime change list.